Welcome back to the Bears Talk podcast. I am your host and the managing editor of BearsTalk.com, Brian Perez, and we have a great show, Bears fans. We are going to bring back a great friend of the show, Athlon Sports NFL draft expert Luke Easterling, who is as dialed in as any draft analyst when it comes to the 2024 NFL Scouting Combine that kicked off. Really, the on-field drill started today, which means even though players have been down there, coaches and GMs have been speaking, the big time die-hard draft fans, this is when it really starts, when the prospects get on the field and we start getting data, 40-yard dashes, vertical jumps, broad jumps. A position of interest for the Chicago Bears started today's workouts, Thursday night, with the defensive line, the edge rushers, possibly a few draft prospects that could be in the mix for the Chicago Bears pick at number 9 overall. And of course, we have to catch up on all the latest quarterback conversation. Luke is going to bring his perspective on some of the changing narrative that we're starting to see down in Indianapolis when it comes to Caleb Williams and some of the other 2024 NFL draft prospects. Let's go, Bears. Let's have some Bears talk. Before I bring Luke in, I want to let you guys all know about a really cool deal we have going right now with our partner over at Homage. The awesome, t-shirt, hoodies, you name it. This cool hoodie right here was sent to me by the good folks over at Homage. If you go into the description of this video, you'll see a link that brings you to a 15% off coupon code for your first purchase at Homage. Get yourself one of these hoodies, Bears fans. It helps support the show, and you'll look good in the process. Let's get the business stuff out of the way. Let's get down to what's happening on the field in Indianapolis and maybe really what's happening off the field. Tomorrow, maybe you're listening to this in your car ride to work on Friday, and maybe at this point, Caleb Williams will have already spoken to the media, Bears fans, the Bears front office, anybody and everyone who has anything to do with the Chicago Bears is waiting for this moment. Caleb Williams meeting the media. We've heard a lot about Caleb's quirky personality. We've heard a lot about Caleb Williams' father and his role in his, basically since he was a 10-year-old youth football player, but we haven't heard a lot from Caleb himself. ESPN put out an article this week. Caleb Williams said a lot of really good things that should be music to Bears fans' ears. We'll bring Luke on in a few minutes to talk about that article and some of the things that Caleb talked about in terms of wanting to be a legend, mentioning names like Walter Payton and Michael Jordan and even Deep Dish Pizza. You know that Caleb Williams is doing his homework on Chicago, and more importantly, how to win over Bears fans. I think that, was it a little rehearsed? Did it seem maybe a little political? Was it kind of a guy who is paying close attention to what the narrative around him is? Meaning, a lot of people think Caleb Williams is all about me, all about brand, not necessarily about winning football games and Super Bowl, since he's already got $10 million in the bank. Caleb Williams went a long way to proving people wrong in that ESPN article, and he's really going to have to step up to that next level when he gets to the podium on Friday and gives Bears fans and really the entire NFL universe our first real look at who he is in the spotlight as a potential NFL quarterback. Caleb Williams has taken a lot of heat for what he did during his final season at USC, both his on-field performance kind of falling off in the second half of the season and some of his decisions, not to speak with the media and his emotional breakdown after the loss to Washington. The Caleb Williams narrative has basically been created by everyone but him because he hasn't really had a chance to address this stuff. This will be his first time fielding questions as basically a pro quarterback. He hasn't been drafted yet. That won't come until April 25th, but this will be our first real exposure to what he will be like as the face of the Chicago Bears franchise. So it's going to be really interesting to pay attention to that. We'll have another episode of Bears Talk early next week to kind of review everything he said. But before we get to that, we got to bring in our guest. Luke is here. Luke is the man. Luke is the NFL draft expert for Athlon Sports. You can go to your favorite newsstand and find Athlon Sports NFL 2024 NFL Draft Guide. This is the dude that basically wrote it. Luke, I know we are officially in crazy season for you. We are in chaos season for you, but it's a good time. It's a good time to be a draft analyst, draft fan. How are you handling the pressure of all the workouts and reports and news coming out of Indianapolis, my friend?
Hey, pressure is a gift, right? We love it. It's our time of year, man. This is always when we ramp it up. You and I have been doing this for a long time, so we know that this is our favorite time of year. Two things before we get started. First of all, that intro is fire, man. That intro is so sick. I love it. Gets me hyped every single time. And dude, props to Homage, man. I love Homage so much. They got so much great stuff. They didn't pay me to say a damn thing, so just go to the website. If you love the nostalgic old school sports stuff, it's not just football. They got so much cool stuff on that site, man. You guys got to go check it out. I love that site.
Speaking of old school, man, you gave props to our intro. I got to give props to your background, man. Sweetness. And
I figured I'd be a little nicer about it this week. No strip sack of Justin Fields behind me. I got sweetness in the old creamsicle back there for you.
Hey, look, like, the audience, it sounded like Caleb Williams knew his audience too this week when he was speaking to ESPN, dropping names like Walter Payton and Michael Jordan and saying that he doesn't just want to win Super Bowls. He wants to be like an immortal sports figure. He wants to be at that table with guys like Walter Payton and Michael Jordan and all the greats that have come before him. What were your impressions? First of all, did you read the ESPN article? I'm assuming you did. What were your impressions from what were your takeaways, basically? Do you think it was sincere, honest, rehearsed, scripted? Did it help Caleb Williams? Did it hurt Caleb Williams? What was your reaction to what he was saying in that piece?
Whether you can say it was rehearsed or not, you know, everybody knows this kind of stuff is at least coached, right? This time of year, there's these guys literally, a lot of times their management team, they'll employ a media expert, basically. This is how you handle yourself in these situations. This is what you say in these interviews and stuff. And that, I don't see that necessarily as a disingenuous thing. I see it as a smart thing. You're preparing yourself for how you're going to be viewed. These things do matter whether you like it or not. And I think, the answers that he had were evidence that he, like you said, he understands the audience. He's able to read the room now in a way that he understands that if he's going to go to Chicago, the last thing he wants to do is have a fan base who's begrudgingly accepting him because he is either said it outright or allowed it to the narrative to kind of continue that maybe he doesn't want to be there. Maybe, so for him to come out there and at least squash all that, you can argue about whether or not it's, again, completely honest or what have you. But I think it's important for him to say, like, hey, listen, I don't know where that's coming from. If I go to Chicago, I'm going to be stoked. If I go anywhere else, I'm going to be stoked. That kind of hedging, I think fans will latch onto and be like, see, he doesn't even, it doesn't matter to him to come to Chicago. You can make of it what you want. I think it's really much ado about nothing. I think it really comes down to, and you can talk about the same stuff, the messages on the fingernails and so many of these other tiny little things that people want to latch onto just to tear him down. To me, I think there's some football reasons why maybe you could see, some people being concerned about him being such a can't miss prospect when you look at some of the film. But at the end of the day, that stuff is all kind of small. And I'm more interested in what happens on the field, right? You talk about his dad and his management team and how is he the guy on the field when the game's on the line? Is he the guy that in the locker room is going to lead your team? Those are the types of things I'm really interested in. We're not going to be able to glean that from that article or any of those things that he says. But I think for Bears fans, it's at least nice to hear him say, I want to do that type of thing for that city. I want to be in that. If I'm going to go there, that's my expectation. It's excellence. It's championships. It's immortality, to use the word he used. But I don't see anything negative coming out of that at all.
So, as a draft analyst, as a longtime football evaluator, a guy who's studied a ton of quarterbacks and decades of combine press conferences and podium media sessions, what do you want to hear from Caleb Williams tomorrow? What can he do to maybe calm or ease any of the concerns you might have about him? What is a win for Caleb Williams at the podium tomorrow?
I mean, to me, a win is be genuine, be yourself. I think that a lot of people can see through the BS when you're trying to to shoot for that. Like, oh, what's a win for me and how should I be perceived? You can be authentic without, revealing too much in one way or doing it. Just be clear and honest and understand the context of your situation. You're the best player in the draft to most people. All the signs are pointing to you, being the number one pick, regardless of who's picking there. And so as long as you're armed with that knowledge, I would think the biggest win for him is I would like to see him composed and calm and able to kind of roll with whatever questions. I'd like to see him laughing and just in a manner that he's comfortable, that he's not going to be, oh man, I hope I didn't say the right thing, or, or even being, aggravated at questions or something like that. I think that's the kind of stuff that would maybe not concern me, but just be like, oh man, he probably could have handled that better. I just want to see a guy who's comfortable no matter what's being asked of him, and a guy that's just being himself. I think that's the most important thing I'd want to see.
We've heard a lot about Caleb Williams' father and the influence that he's had on Caleb's career. And at this point, Caleb Williams does not have an agent. He has really a team of lawyers and marketing guys. And really, it's his father who's managing all of it. He's kind of in charge. He's been in charge from day one. There's plenty of reports about Caleb Williams not even being aware of this concept of wanting equity in a team. It seems like that's something his father was using as a vetting question for potential agents in terms of how to kind of break the wheel for some of these rookie contracts and think outside the box and get that equity interest in a future team. It sounds like his father could be a little bit of a handful-ish off the field. It doesn't seem as if his father has really interfered with much of Caleb Williams' on-field career. But what would you, if you were an NFL general manager, director of college scouting, even an owner of a franchise, when you have a father figure like Caleb Williams' dad is, what does that do? How does that impact your scouting report? How does that impact your confidence level that a guy will be able to succeed once they really start separating and detaching from that parent figure? Caleb Williams, we all forget. I mean, he's a kid, right? He's 20. Well, to you and me, Luke, 22 years old. It's a kid, right? He's pretty much been micromanaged by his father his whole life. And, he goes to Chicago, and you would assume that's, some separation from his dad. And now he's got more money than he's ever had, even counting the $10 million he's already got in the bank from NIL deals. Is there any concern that Caleb minus his father could be a little bit less organized, hardworking, motivated? Is his father going to have to be a huge part of this as we go forward, or will his father interfere or be a problem with his pro career? How would you approach this? You're writing a scouting report on Caleb Williams. Where does the father issue rank in your tier of concerns?
I mean, the easy and honest answer is I have no clue. I have no clue. It's part of it is just because we're dealing with a lot of speculation and a lot of kind of what it appears to be on the outside. The reality is we really don't know how much influence and how much positive or negative impact any of this is having. And, you say, if I was a general manager, the fact is I've never been in that chair. I've never been in a situation where not only am I tasked with making those decisions, but I also have all the information at my disposal. That's one of the big things that I think the media, when we try to project these guys or even when we're doing mock drafts and trying to keep track of draft stock, there's so much that happens behind the scenes in interviews and, medicals and all this stuff that, that we don't even have access to, that puts us behind the eight ball. Like, we can't know certain things. So when certain things take place based on information we didn't know, that we couldn't have done any better. So when it comes to that, I have no idea. Do I think it's just as likely that, him gaining some of that separation could be a bad thing or a good thing? Maybe. I think those are variables that definitely could apply. I just don't know to what degree it will make a big difference in whether or not he's successful. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. doesn't have an agent yet either. Much ado was made about Lamar Jackson's situation, that he and his mom were handling all his stuff, and he's won the MVP twice and he got paid. So, there's so many things that there are other situations you could kind of compare it to, but at the end of the day, it's just so much of like a vague narrative that I don't have enough concrete information about to feel like I can have an educated opinion about. I try to stay more concerned with the football side of things, because there's so much about that in reality that I'm not going to know. So I try not to base it on that.
You know, it's funny you mentioned Marvin Harrison Jr. because this whole time we hear about Caleb Williams and possible issues related to him, maybe like being a me first guy, diva guy, and a lot of the pro fields Bears fans, the Bears fans that want Chicago to trade back a couple of spots, pick up a boatload of future picks, and use maybe the 2 or 3 or 4 overall to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. And you don't hear about Marvin Harrison Jr., who his father, Marvin Harrison Sr., told him basically like any piece of advice, his biggest piece of advice to Marvin Harrison Jr. was be more of a diva, right? And he is not working out at the combine, not going to work out at a pro day. He's basically telling the league, watch the tape. Now, personally, I love that.
I love
a player who is saying, I'm not going to risk tearing an ACL. I'm not going to risk blowing an Achilles. I'm not going to risk an injury.
What are you going to learn, Brian? What is he going to show you that he is not?
You know, the only thing that these combine workouts and pro day workouts actually do is create more confusion. And I think they lead to more mistakes.
Yeah.
Because you end up drifting further away from the film. Because think about something. You had the college season ended. The body of work, the game tape is all filed away, archived. Teams have watched it. And then you start the draft season, which is really the smoke, the confusion, the distraction season. Senior Bowl practices, 3 days of practices suddenly create a new draft narrative around a player, better or worse. Then the underwear Olympics at the combine double down on that narrative that gets created from 3 days of practice. Great athlete, but maybe he's not a very good football player, but you get blinded by the athleticism. So a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. is kind of breaking the wheel and saying, I've played the last several years. I'm the best wide receiver in this draft. Everybody already knows that. I don't need to show you that I can run a 4.38, run beautiful routes against air, which are irrelevant in a football game. Watch the tape, pick me at number 3, number 4, number 5. Now, while I agree with the principle and what he's doing, what we're not seeing, like what if Caleb Williams said, I'm not throwing at my pro day. I'm not doing any of this. You're just going to draft me based on my tape. He would be viewed as a diva, a potential problem. He might not be a guy that's a team first guy. This is not the way a quarterback's supposed to act. He would have that tag. I think there is something about Caleb Williams that the media has latched onto, maybe because he's a little bit different, right? And he's not even really different. He's just a little bit more overt with some of the things he does, that he's an easy target right now. When you're the number 1 pick overall, and you've kind of been the player who's going to be the number 1 pick overall for years, this is board season, right? Luke, how many times do we see it? Guys get over-scouted in February and March, and then the cycle comes full circle in April, and the guy that was going to be the number 1 overall pick in August is the number 1 overall pick in April, despite everything we talk about now. But that's kind of what I want to transition to, Luke, is because you see guys like ESPN's Dan Orlovsky on Get Up Thursday morning, and he's basically saying if he's the Chicago Bears, he's taking Jaden Daniels number 1 overall, the quarterback from Arizona State. And while I like Jaden Daniels, the prospect, this is exactly what I'm talking about in terms of like this time of year, changing narratives. Jaden Daniels entered the 2023 season as probably at best, day 2, late day 2, early day 3 prospect, kind of like the Joe Burrow career trajectory. He has an amazing 2023 season, and now we're going to say that Jaden Daniels is going to leapfrog Caleb Williams to be the number 1 overall pick. Like, what is happening? Do you think there's any universe that exists right now? And maybe there is. Maybe you think there is. You're more dialed into the NFL draft, like the seller of the NFL draft than I am right now. Any universe that the Bears are not going to take Caleb Williams? Let's assume, Luke, they keep the first pick. They don't trade out of it, okay? They trade out of it, they're obviously not taking Caleb Williams. That's an obvious answer. But is there any universe that the Bears keep the first pick and don't take Caleb Williams?
No. I mean, no, there's no. You know, a couple of things real quick on the last things we said. We're talking about Harrison. It's very simple to me. What does he have to gain? What does he have to lose? He has nothing to gain, and he has anything more than 0 to lose, and it's a good decision, right? And I think when you talk about the diva concept and why it may be different for Williams, it's always going to be different for quarterbacks than it is for everybody else. And I think it's less a Caleb Williams issue and more like if a quarterback decides not to throw at all, now you're having the face of the franchise conversation where if it's Marvin Harrison, you're like, I get it. It's fine. You don't care as much whether right or wrong if it's a receiver as opposed to a quarterback. But to your point, and again, I'm a huge Jaden Daniels fan. I think that the leaps and bounds he made as a passer and even his skill set as a whole remind me so much of Lamar Jackson. Again, taller but skinny, leaner build, but absolutely like game-changing, blazing speed as a runner. But the growth he made as a pocket passer last season was what turned him from a mid-round kind of, upside, maybe he can develop kind of guy to okay, we're dealing with a legit quarterback prospect here because he could win from the pocket. He proved he could win from the pocket in addition to he was coming off of the first read to the second read to the third read instead of like first read and then bailing and taking off and relying on his speed. We saw so much development from him this season that makes me excited for his potential. And I do think there's a legit conversation to have between him and Drake May, which we would have thought in August was absolutely crazy, right? So that's the conversation to me is who goes to between Daniels and May. And I think you can have that conversation. It's not that all things being equal, you can't make a strong argument, I think, depending on your offense, depending on, what you need from the position. And again, what happens behind the scenes in those interviews and in the whiteboard talks and all those things where you couldn't if you come out of that thinking, man, I really think Daniels is actually the guy, or I really think Drake May is actually the guy. That wouldn't shock me, I think, because those variables can be so different sometimes. But I just think on the surface, man, when you really look at the upside that Caleb Williams brings to the table, I just don't see a world in which, even with all the advancements and the improvement that we saw from Jaden Daniels, I just feel like not only do I feel like Caleb Williams has got that guy, I think the league views him as that guy. And I think there's just no way he doesn't go number one, no matter who's picking there.
I think Brandon, who made a comment here in the chat, has a great point too. Like, what I don't understand, guys like Dan Orlovsky saying take Jaden Daniels number one overall. I mean, if you're going to do that, if the Bears are going to go away from Caleb Williams, who is more of a nuclear passer than Justin Fields, a guy that can throw from every arm angle, every platform, short, mid-range, deep ball, every play is possible with Caleb Williams, which is not the case with Justin Fields. If you're going to move off of that type of guy who Ryan Pohl said at the Combine, I don't know if you heard it, Luke, but he says, quarterbacks are in two buckets. They're artists and they're surgeons. You can be creative or you can be precise. Caleb Williams is both. He's an artistic surgeon, right? Jaden Daniels is more in that.
He can be. I think that's the thing I would speak to is that I wanted to see Caleb Williams be more precise and more consistent this year, and I didn't. That's the really.
Yeah, but Luke, you also have to remember. You got to remember, it's really hard to be a precise surgeon when
your offensive line is terrible and your defense is giving up 40 points a game.
His career at USC, I think there's a stat that said he's 12-0 when USC gives up less than 34 points.
Less than 34.
Let's just put that in perspective. Like USC could have given up 33 points a game and he's undefeated. Like that's so now you're talking about a guy who maybe has to catch up to a 40+ point defensive effort.
You have to play hero ball on every snap.
You now have to color outside the line.
Giving up, I think they were 121st out of 134 teams in total scoring defense last year. I agree with that. That speaks to that definitely.
So you got to color outside the lines. You got to be the artist. You can't just be the surgeon knowing that your defense has your back, right? So if we think about what Brandon's bringing up here, if the Bears are going to go for more of the pure artist, which I think is Jaden Daniels, they have that already in Justin Fields with on-field, like proven at least on some level of success in the NFL with Justin Fields. And they can keep the Jaden Daniels type quarterback that they already have, trade out, and get that boatload of picks. So if you're telling me that
Fields is like a year older than Jaden Daniels too, by the way, I think he's like maybe
exactly, and he's got about 40 more pounds of body armor on him.
Yep.
So if 100%. You're telling me that Jaden Daniels should be the number one overall pick, not only is that a horrible take, dismissing the fact that Caleb Williams is just a better quarterback, in my opinion, one of the best to come out in years, in my opinion. So just the pure quarterback take is terrible. But you're also saying replace Justin Fields with a smaller Justin Fields.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
Smaller, less experienced Justin Fields, right?
Right. And you know, oh, well, you know, look at the year that Jaden Daniels had. Well, yeah, I mean, Justin Fields was an incredible passer when he was throwing to 3 first-round picks too, just like Jaden Daniels was doing, right? So, I mean, it's very similar in terms of the outlook for Justin Fields in year 4 as Jaden Daniels, where Jaden Daniels would be in year 4. So I don't know why, guys. This is what
I love
really
Dan, but I'm not tracking with that at all. I don't see that thing.
I don't know Dan personally, and quite honestly, don't really care. At the end of the day, these takes to me are the February turning into March. We can't keep talking about Caleb Williams takes.
Yep.
It is, we got to figure out some way to create buzz. I wrote about it on Bears Talk. Mission accomplished, Dan Orlovsky. I wrote about an article saying Dan Orlovsky thinks the Bears should take Jaden Daniels #1 overall. Got attention. You know, the tweet with him saying that is in the article. And I felt dirty doing it because I'm like, you know, I'm feeding into this machine that is nonsense. I mean, there is no universe in which Jaden Daniels would get drafted over Caleb Williams at the #1 pick by the Bears, because the Bears will trade out if that's the case, right? What do you think, Luke? What is the gap? Again, for all of you who are watching, all the Bears talkers that are watching right now, if you don't know Luke's background, you really got to do some research on him, because Luke he's an OG in the NFL draft game. All right. He has been evaluating quarterbacks forever. He played quarterback. He has been evaluating quarterbacks. He knows quarterbacks. So in this draft class, Luke, what do you think is the gap between Caleb Williams and whoever QB2 is, whether that's Drake May, Jaden Daniels? Some people are going to say JJ McCarthy, or even some Bo Nix fans. What is the gap between Caleb Williams and that next guy? And I'm going to compound it with another question here. In years past, when the Trevor Lawrence draft came around, it was like Trevor Lawrence, the draft we already knew started at #2 overall.
Yep.
And the Jets were, is it Zach Wilson or the 49, Trey Lance? There's the Mac Jones, Justin Fields debate. There was a cluster of guys that really kicked off the second pick in that draft, but there was no debate. It was Trevor Lawrence and then a Grand Canyon to the next guy. Is that similar? Are we seeing a similar gap in 2024? Or do you think that for one reason or another, it's a little closer than that?
Well, I mean, you got to remember you're talking to a guy that had Trevor Lawrence at 1 overall and Justin Fields at 3. Yeah, I had Kyle Pitts as my #2 player in that draft, and thanks a lot, Arthur Smith, for making me look stupid by not using him. But I mean, I thought the Jets taking.
Hey, Luke, there's a chance your #2 player could be catching passes from your #3 player this year.
I'm fine with that. No, but again, I was as high on Justin Fields as anybody, and I thought that he should have been the easy pick for the Jets at #2. You know, we talked all through that draft, right? When you guys traded up to get him, we were I was congratulating you because of how much I love Justin Fields, right? So I might not be the right guy to talk to, because I didn't see a massive gap between Lawrence and Fields. I really didn't. Again, #1 guy overall, #3 overall prospect in the entire draft. That's where I had Justin Fields, and I'm still very confident in his potential once he actually gets some stuff around him to work with. But for me, I still thought, I don't know if anybody was higher on Justin Fields than I was in that process, and I still had Trevor Lawrence as the clear-cut guy. And I feel like that is the same thing in this class. I feel like I really like Jaden Daniels. I really like some of the things that Drake May brings to the table. And I think in any other class you could have, if you had just those two guys, you'd be having a very spirited, very worthy debate about who should go 1 and who should go 2. And I think that's the debate that Washington or whoever will have at 2, is who to take between the other 2 guys, because Caleb Williams is the one. The Caleb Williams is #1. And no matter how big that gap is between 1 and 2, there is one. I don't know how to quantify it except to say that there is one, and that there's another gap between those 2 guys and the next group. But it's Caleb by himself, even by just a little bit or a decent bit. But those other 2 guys, the gap between Daniels and May is very, very close and much smaller, I think, than the gap between them and Caleb Williams.
And it's funny because that draft class, that it was Trevor Lawrence and then everybody else for the masses, the general masses, was to date, you know, Trevor Lawrence, I think it's safe to say, has been probably the best. But the gap between his level of production and is Justin Fields, I guess, the second best. I'm probably missing somebody from that draft class, but Trevor Lawrence hasn't blown
Wilson,
away.
Mac Jones, and Trey Lance. That was the first.
Yeah, I mean
round.
that.
Those were
I
the
mean,
5
think
first
about
round
that,
guys.
Luke. What a disaster!
Yeah,
what a and this is what I mean. Bears fans, take a step back and understand that when you have a guy who is the guy at the position, and then there's the cluster of guys who come after him. The cluster of guys is where the problems will happen. Okay?
Remember the debate after the 49ers traded up? It was like, is it going to be Mac Jones? Is it going to be Trey Lance? 0 for 2. It wouldn't have mattered.
I mean, that cluster is where the problems come. Justin Fields was in that cluster. When you have the guy, the Joe Burrow, the Andrew Luck, the Trevor Lawrence, even if they end up being just a good starting quarterback, the chances are they're going to at least be a 8 to 10 year guy for your franchise. They might not be generational. They might not be Hall of Fame, but the Trey Lance and Zach Wilson and Mac Joneses, they come from that like next cluster. This isn't like the 2000 and what year was it? 18 draft? Was that the Lamar Jackson year?
Yes.
2017, somewhere around there, where Baker Mayfield was the first overall pick. And then you had Sam Darnold, and then you had Josh Rosen, and Josh Allen was the hit, and Lamar Jackson was the hit. If you remember that draft year, nobody knew who the number 1 pick was going to be until like the eve of the draft, right? So there wasn't that guy. That cluster of picks existed the entire draft prospect, the entire draft process. When you have a cluster of quarterbacks and you really can't decipher which one of these quarterbacks is better than the other, there's a chance that a lot of those guys are going to end up being NFL backup quarterbacks. They're going to be backups.
It's the old adage about roster building. If you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none, right?
Exactly.
If you have 5 quarterbacks at the top of your board, do you have any?
Exactly. And that's why when there is the undisputed, I think, general consensus that Caleb is here and the cluster starts below him, you don't pass him up. Period. You don't pass him up. The thing that I think Bears fans want more than anything, Luke, is closure. Like this has to end, and it has to end like as soon as possible, because the Bears fan civil war on social media has been very real. I mean, this quarterback debate has torn apart this franchise's fan base, like right down the middle. You look at there's some Bears content creators who post polls on Twitter. Who do you want, Caleb Williams or Justin Fields? And there was one poll that had like 1,500 replies, which that's a pretty good sample size. And it was like, of course, there's like other options, like other or whatever it might be.
Right.
There was like 47.
It's not going to be another. It's not going to be another. Just so
right. There was like 47.1% Caleb Williams, 46.9% Justin Fields, and then you had the other, right?
Right.
So this is split right down the middle. And I think the sooner we get to closure with a decision here, Ryan Poles said this week he doesn't want to live in the gray area. He wants to do right by Justin Fields, which I think we all know means trade him as soon as possible. As soon as there's closure, man, I think the offseason, the pre-draft, the run-up to the draft, really embracing and enjoying this rare opportunity of having the number 1 pick with in my opinion, I mean, I'm sticking to this generational quarterback in the draft. You got to be able to enjoy this.
And another top 10 pick. You guys should be having the best offseason.
I mean, Bears fans Ryan Poles needs to give Bears fans a gift, and that is closure to the situation and allow Bears fans to enjoy what will be a franchise-defining, franchise-changing moment. I have never felt more confident in any quarterback prospect that the Bears might end up drafting than I do with Caleb Williams. And I've gone through dating all the way back to the 1993 NFL draft when was it the 93 draft? No, it might have been 94 or 95 when the Bears traded for Rick Meyer. Mm-hmm. Rick Meyer was going to his 3rd year. They traded a 1st-round pick for Rick Meyer, and then they ended up drafting Caleb Williams. Cade McNown,
UCLA,
out of UCLA in the 1st round. And then they end up drafting Rex Grossman in the first round. And then the next big real quarterback move was trading for Jay Cutler, which felt really good at the time.
Yep.
And then to drafting Mitch Trubisky, which I think most Bears fans, if you're being honest with yourselves, you knew that was doomed from the start. Terrible. Passing on Deshaun Watson, who that was the guy at the time.
Trading up to do it.
Trading up to do it. I mean, this has been a streak that Caleb Williams will end. He will end it. Justin Fields has been fine. Caleb Williams will end it. And it's time for Bears fans to be able to enjoy it. Before we transition to more combine talk, Bears fans, you're watching the video. You're watching this podcast. You're listening in your car ride. Hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Hit the like button. Comment on the YouTube channel. Rate and review the podcast in your favorite podcast provider. Head over to bearstalk.com. Make sure you check out all our Chicago Bears content there. You got to be following the great one, Luke Easterling. At Luke Easterling. Check out all his draft work on Athlon Sports. You will become a smarter Chicago Bears fan. And as I said before, if you look in the show's description, you want a hoodie like this one from Homage, you get 15% off just for being a Bears talker. Isn't that fantastic? Luke, the NFL Combine. What does it mean? Where do you value this? So you have scouting reports that you're doing for Athlon. You have a magazine that's on the shelves. A guy like Chop Robinson today. I mean, the dude looked like a first-round running back in the drills, running a 4.48 at 250 pounds. I'm an NFL team. I'm saying, do I have the next Derrick Henry on my hands here? What does that do for a dude like that who's got to be chasing down quarterbacks? Length might be a little bit of an issue. Production wasn't great at Penn State. I think he's a first-round defender. Bears need an edge rusher. Chop Robinson, has he just put himself in the conversation to be the number 9 pick in the NFL draft?
My cardinal rule about the combine is it should always either confirm or send you back to the tape, right? It should, and it's one of those two with Chop Robinson, which is it confirms the tape to me, because coming into this week, he's not the most complete guy in this edge class. I think there are more complete defenders who can defend the run and set the edge and maybe more scheme versatile and give you enough power and enough things. I thought Chop Robinson was the most explosive edge rusher I saw on tape in this class in terms of the first step up the field, being able to beat offensive tackles around the edge. Nobody had his explosiveness, his get off, and everything we saw today just confirmed that, right? Absolute elite explosiveness, elite athleticism. The production was you want to see him finish at the quarterback more often. You want to see him not just get past the offensive tackle, but to finish the play, make the big plays, and that's where you want to see the production. If you need a guy who's going to, set a strong edge and anchor against the run and turn things back inside, he's probably not your guy. Can he develop that? Maybe. But, I mean, he's a get up the field, blow by your turnstile offensive tackle, and get after the quarterback type of guy. That's the type of athlete we saw today. So, for me, it confirms the film for him, and it can – if you're surprised one way or the other, it should always send you back to the film to say, what did I miss? Whether good or bad, right? If somebody surprises you in a good way, surprises you in a disappointing way, excuse me, I got to sneeze. I know it's coming. It's one of those things where you should always be like, okay, how did I miss this? Or if this guy runs a 4.28 and I did not see that speed on tape, go back and watch, see if it shows up on the field. And if it doesn't, question how valuable that is. I think so much of what is most valuable about this weekend is stuff we don't see, right? It's the interviews, it's the medical evaluations, it's those sorts of things. We talked about it kind of with Marvin Harrison in that other segment where he doesn't really have much to prove. I think the Combine, the Senior Bowl, those things can prove things for certain guys if there's stuff you need to see them do that maybe they weren't asked to do, or maybe they weren't in a position wherever their role was with their team, or maybe they were injured for some of the season. There's certain guys in certain positions where you want to see certain things, and that can be an advantage to you. But it really, at the end of the day, the tape should be everything. And whatever happens this week should either confirm what you already saw, or if it didn't, you need to go find out why.
So a guy like Chop Robinson, kind of like an athlete shot out of a cannon, pin his ears back, get after the quarterback. Perfect guy to complement Montez Sweat, you think?
Well, and I want to get there's a question here that kind of gets to that, is how to kind of stack this edge group, and it seems to insinuate that Leitu Latu is kind of the one, and then everybody else is there. Dallas Turner is the guy for me. I feel like, and again, another guy that dominated the combine today, but it's again confirmed the film for me. I already saw a guy who was athletic and versatile and can move around and can drop into coverage and can win off the edge but counter inside. He's the top edge guy for me. Again, a guy who kind of waited his turn behind Will Anderson Jr., finally got a chance to be a full-time starter this year, and 15 tackles for loss, 11 sacks, will prove to be the guy. And again, all the numbers we saw running in the 4.4s as an edge guy, just ridiculous. He's the guy for me, and part of it has nothing to do with Leitu Latu, the player, because as the player, I think he was as dominant as any edge guy in the country this year. He's an older prospect. And the medicals are going to be huge. This is a guy that had a neck injury when he was at Washington and retired from football, medically retired, and then came back, made an incredible. I mean, I'm so excited to see him back on the field and healthy, and you hope that continues. But that is a reason why, if you're trying to assess, draft value and stock and risk and those sorts of things that you have to evaluate, especially at the top of the draft, the closer you get to the top, the more that is important because of the level of risk there. That's why Latu is the edge two for me in this class behind Turner. But Robinson and Jared Verse, who had a great workout as well, again, kind of confirmed the film. I think he's not the elite athlete that guys like Robinson and Turner are, but I think he's so good at everything. I think he's got a pretty high floor, even if he doesn't have the high ceiling of some of these other guys. So I think it's Turner and then those other three guys for certain reasons. Any of those guys would look really nice across from Montez Sweat. Turner's really the only guy I would really feel comfortable with at 9. If I was able to move down and get Robinson or Verse or Latu, I'd feel a little bit better about that. But I feel like Turner's the upside guy that I would feel most comfortable with if I'm sticking at 9 and taking an edge guy.
So the Chicago Bears last year spent a second-round pick on Javon Dexter with the thought process that he could become that interior disruptor, penetrating, potential 3-technique defensive lineman. And his season was kind of a slow start, finished stronger, maybe not still as strong as you'd like him to be, but upside is there. Zach Pickens was a 3rd-round pick from South Carolina, another interior defender, maybe 3-tech type guy. But I don't know if the Bears have that answer on the roster right now, which it's a critical question or need that might need to be filled because of how important the role is in Matt Eberflus's defense. And a guy like Florida State's Braden Fisk.
Yep.
Saw him down at the Senior Bowl. My man has a little bit of Aaron Donald to him. His combine numbers were very similar today. Dane Brugler put out a tweet that Fisk's short shuttle was 4.37. Aaron Donald's was 4.39.
Yeah, Fisk was the best player on the field today. Fisk was the best player we saw on the field today at the combine.
You're talking about a guy who in short areas moves quicker than Aaron Donald.
Yep.
And if you look at his body,
way bigger. He's way bigger.
And he's a bigger dude, but he still has that like stocky frame.
Yep.
Down at the Senior Bowl, he was all motor, unstoppable blend of power and explosive twitch. Is he a 1st-round pick now?
I literally just wrote it, man. I feel like he went from that like comfortable day 2 guy, especially after the Senior Bowl, had a really great Senior Bowl. The film was already solid, right? You saw it, but he went from like okay, this could be like a solid, maybe 2nd or 3rd round guy that would kind of overachieve. And then he goes out there and blows the doors off the place at Lucas Oil Stadium, right? So, I mean, when you have that type of tape, you have that kind of performance at the Senior Bowl, and then you show that you're that kind of athlete, those guys don't really last until day 2 a lot of the time. So, I think he's absolutely in that conversation. You look at the top of the interior defensive line class, right? There's no real like total package guy, right? You got Johnny Newton, you got Byron Murphy II, who are both explosive upfield 3-technique guys, but they're kind of undersized, right? And then you have the other end of the spectrum where you got a guy like Tavondre Sweat, who's like, 366 pounds and built like a refrigerator and can, plug the gaps in the middle and even give you some push upfield, kind of like a Vita Vea type. But there's nobody that's kind of can do enough of all of it until you look at Braden Fisk. And he can do enough of it. And then again, to show the athleticism today, he is the guy that I think could work his way into that 1st-round range. Absolutely.
Could he be the first interior defensive lineman drafted?
I mean, again, maybe. Again, it just team fit and need is going to be so important with how those guys come off the board because, again, Byron Murphy's 6 feet tall. And, there's an advantage to that in some ways because of the leverage and the pad level that you're able to get because you're already there's no offensive lineman that's going to start out lower than you are at 6 feet tall. Johnny Newton is 6'1", 6'2", and sub 300 pounds. Tavondre Sweat, again, on the complete other end of the spectrum. I feel like Braden Fisk is the guy that kind of shoots the middle of all of that, where he's big enough, obviously athletic enough, and maybe versatile enough to play in some different roles that if teams are confident that they can wait on a defensive tackle and not have to take Newton or not have to take Murphy early, and it gets long enough to where none of them are off the board. Darius Robinson from Missouri, I think, is another guy that could be in that conversation depending on what you need for your scheme. But if it goes on long enough to where it gets into the 20s and nobody has come off the board and the right team feels like Fisk is the more well-rounded guy, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
So, Luke, before I let you go, Friday we have defensive backs and tight ends working out.
Yep.
Saturday's the money day. Quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs. That's the real fun. You got the defensive backs on Friday. They're the guys that could challenge for those low 4.3s. You got wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks, the wide receivers. Might have a couple who could also challenge for those low 4.3s. And then Sunday with the Dancing Bears with the offensive linemen. All of the times generally looks like tomorrow 3 p.m. Eastern, Saturday 1 p.m., Sunday 1 p.m. Eastern. Is there a few guys on your short list that you're really looking forward to seeing work out who you think, not to put you on the spot here, but who you think could be Bears draft targets, Bears wide receivers going to be in need, maybe a Brock Bowers type? He's going to be on the field tomorrow. I haven't followed up whether or not he's doing all the workouts, but is there any of these players you think Bears fans should keep a close eye on over the next couple of days?
Well, I mean, with Bowers, as far as I know, the last thing I heard is he didn't know if he was working out yet. That's the last thing I heard is he hadn't decided yet. So maybe we'll know that by the time people are listening to this tomorrow. But that Rome Odunze is my guy, man. He's been my guy since last season. He coming out of December of 2022. I was like, man, I really, really like this guy, to the point where if you go back and read, I had a mock draft in the Sports Illustrated preview issue this year for the 2023 season. I got to do a mock draft for that. And I had the Bears taking Rome Odunze in the top 10. And I was like, felt like I was really putting my neck out there because he wasn't, nobody was really putting him in that range yet back in, July. And I was really confident in him, man. And obviously he goes out and has the season he's had, 6'2", 6'3", 210 plus. And I think he's got a shot at 4.39. I think he's got a legit shot at running sub 4.4 at that size. And man, he's so smooth. I feel like he's Keenan Allen, but faster. DeAndre Hopkins, but faster. I feel like that's the kind of guy you're getting. And I know he's a top guy, so I don't know if he's not gonna be a sleeper to anybody, man. But him, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr. If any of those guys were the only top receiver in that draft, they'd be like the unquestioned number one. If Odunze gets anywhere near number 9, it's going to be an absolute heist if the Bears get their hands on that guy.
I mean, the Bears fans that would be. I don't know what better scenario Bears fans would have if you end the first pick with Caleb Williams, the 9th pick with one of the following 3. Malik Neighbors, who is my guy.
Yep. With good
I might
reason.
like him more than Marvin Harrison Jr. I won't be. I've said this to you before. I've said this to the guys on the Tape Never Lies podcast. I said it to Jeff Risdon on this show. And I put out on Twitter, I don't know if Marvin Harrison's going to be the first receiver drafted. He probably will be. But Malik Neighbors, he might be the first guy.
Dude, man. All three of these guys are so good, and they're different. They're differently good. But man,
the worst thing that's happened to these, the worst thing that's happened to these guys is they're in the same draft class.
Yep, 100%. And honestly, and to speak to the Bears situation, if you've read my mock drafts over the last month or so, my favorite thing to do is to trade Justin Fields to Atlanta, because I give you guys that number 38 or 43 pick or whatever it is, so you end up with that second rounder. If you don't get a receiver at 9 and you end up with that pick from Atlanta, that is the sweet spot where so many of those guys. I see a question up there about A.D. Mitchell from Texas. Love that dude. Again, you could stack, those 3 receivers at the top. You could stack the next 10 guys in like any order, and I'd probably be fine with it. So no matter who gets to that early to mid second round range, you're going to have guys that would normally be top 20 picks they'll just have to be there because there's only so many picks and way too many receivers who are deserving.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, you have 3 guys who in a traditional draft class would be the first receiver drafted.
Yep.
Now you're talking about
top 5 talents in this draft. I think all 3 of those guys.
Now you're talking about the traditional wide receiver 2, the usual wide receiver 2 talent in an NFL draft class will be the wide receiver 4 in this draft, which means the wide receiver 3 is the wide receiver 5.
Yep. 100%.
So you can have a wide receiver that goes like the 8th receiver off the board, and that's early 2nd round. But in years past, that would have been a late 1st rounder, the 5th wide receiver off the board. That's the trickle down effect that ends up happening. So yes, if the Bears are able to trade their way back into the 2nd round, they could end up with a wide receiver there that would have had that late 1st round grade in any draft class that didn't have 3 top of the draft wide receiver prospects in the same class. So, I mean, we could literally see quarterbacks 1, 2, 3, wide receivers 4, 5, 6, offensive tackles 7, 8. I mean, it could be a crazy string of offensive players taken in the first 8, and then Brock Bowers 9. And it keeps going. I mean, I don't know. Maybe Dallas Turner or one of these edge rushers breaks the streak at 9 with the Bears. Cornerback isn't going to do it. Linebacker isn't going to do it. Safety isn't going to do it. It's going to have to be one of those edge rushers. And at that point, are we going to see a run on offensive tackles of that 4th wide receiver? Teams might say that guy's not going to be there in the 2nd round. We could have a historic run of offensive talent come off the board in the first 15 picks. We'll see. Luke, I know I've told everybody where they can find you. First of all, let me just say this too. Luke Easterling gets a 1st round grade from me for holding back the sneeze this whole time. He apologized.
I don't know where it went. I'm telling you, man, it was there. It was so close, and I was like, no, don't do it.
I mean, that's what we talk about, a gamer, clutch performer, stepping up when it matters. The chaos around him doesn't get in his head. Clutch, 1st round grade. Way to come through with that, Luke. Luke, Athlon Sports, at Luke Easterling. Tell everybody, where else are you? Where else can they find you?
I'm over at SI.com. I'm running the draft site over there as well on the Fan Nation Network. So go to SI.com/NFL/draft. So I've got all the content on there. And obviously, like you said, you mentioned the magazine earlier, man. I'm still an old school sucker for a physical copy of that magazine. I love having it, physical media is important to me still. And I think, if there's anybody else out there who just has always grown up like I have reading that magazine, man, it was just so much fun. It was a lot of work, but I was so happy to invest in that magazine and be such a big part of putting this one together. All the rankings, the mock draft, the team sections, all the scouting reports. I got to do all of that stuff this year, man. It was just so fun. And we're really, really proud of the magazine. So go out, buy one. They're on the shelves now. You can buy them online as well, but make sure we can keep making them. Go out and buy them and show everybody that there's still value in that physical media, because we're going to keep doing that as well as giving you all the stuff digitally that you can handle on the websites as well.
And it's not just buy one to keep the lights on over there for Luke. It's also buy one and get smarter on draft weekend. I mean, there is this, like you said, Luke, having the old school draft guide or draft magazine in your hand and flipping right to the page that covers the player who was just drafted. I mean, I grew up with the Mel Kiper Blue Book. There it is.
Where is it? There it is.
That's a beautiful. And look at the cover, boy. A great choice.
There it is. There's your guy. The guy.
Great choice. Bears fans love it. I grew up with the Mel Kiper Bible, the Blue Bible, and that was
the Blue Book.
On the back of the Mel Kiper book, they had the draft tracker. I would handwrite every pick that was made just to kind of memorize who went where. So you have that idea of the rosters that are being developed in real time in the league. There is something about having that at your disposal during the draft. So make sure you pick up that Athlon Sports draft guide, Bears fans, because this is a critical draft for the Bears. You want to have as much intel and information as possible. And a guy like Luke Easterling, his contacts run very deep within the league. You want to make sure you're listening to everything he has to say about the draft. He will be back. Luke will be back. He's not a one and done here. He's a very, very friendly face and name to the program. So he will be back as we kind of get through free agency and the run up to the draft. Draft needs are going to change over the next couple of weeks. So we're going to need Luke back here to kind of reshuffle the board and break it down. Luke, I really appreciate you coming on, brother. You got to come back soon.
Hey, always, man. Always a good time. And the next couple of weeks are going to be fun for Bears fans, probably more than anybody, as we see where the dust settles. But free agency always changes things, and yeah, it's going to be a sprint. It's going to be wild every day up from here until April, man.
Luke, get some sleep, man. I know it'll be at a premium for you over the next couple of weeks.
I wouldn't have it any other way, man. Take care.
That's Luke Easterling from Athlon Sports, from Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation NFL draft site. Make sure you go over to Twitter and you're following him, Bears fans. He is the best of the best. He's one of my oldest friends, not age-wise, just tenure-wise in the industry, maybe age-wise too, actually. Great dude, one of the smartest guys in the room. So pay attention to what he says. He gave us some great insight today. If you're just logging in or jumping into the show now, make sure you rewind and catch all the great takes that Luke gave us. And look, I want Bears fans to understand the storm might get louder and the ship might get a little more rocky as we get on here over the next couple of days. There is a very good chance the Justin Fields era could be coming to an end within a couple of days. I have a belief that a deal with the Atlanta Falcons is right around the corner. I could be wrong. I don't know if the Pittsburgh Steelers are as interested as some people are suggesting. Little birdie on my shoulder told me that that might not be the case. There might be a little more faith in Kenny Pickett than Bears fans are being led to believe right now. In terms of the Atlanta Falcons, oh yeah, the Falcons are in play big time. Justin Fields' hometown guy, Raheem Morris, said point blank, they want a quarterback who not only can make plays, but who can connect with their community. Justin Fields. So I would imagine within the next couple of days, Bears fans, we're going to have closure on this. And I ask you, the diehard Bears talker, please be part of the solution on social media, not the problem. Be the answer, not the chaos. Let's kind of dust ourselves off. Let's end this Chicago Bears fan civil war and rally around the next in line, the next contender to be the QB1, which I believe and hope and have full confidence it will be Caleb Williams. But no matter who you want it to be, I will be there to have a logical, rational conversation, even if these days on Twitter it seems like that is impossible. Make sure you go on to bearstalk.com to catch up on all the latest Chicago Bears news and notes. Follow me on Twitter. You see the handle in the bottom corner there, at Brian Perez NFL. Follow Bears Talk at the Bears Talk. Subscribe, rate, review on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts from. And most importantly, bear down.